Hi everyone. So it's 1 p.m. At least in Europe here, where we are sitting in Copenhagen. So we are going to start with this. So we are the goal of this meeting is so that we can upload it then to a widely available platform like on YouTube, for instance, so that more people can engage with what is being said here, and because basically, I mean, it's of course a matter of citizenship and territory, which is to be discussed way beyond the group that we are forming today. I think we are already very happy to see numerous and also familiar heads that are popping up today. So I will shortly leave the stage to Naja to introduce the context for this meeting. I just want to advertise that we are running into a problem with this format. The problem being that we don't have the image rights consent form from Thomas yet. So Thomas, if you want to be, I mean, because it's a recorded event, and if we want to be able to diffuse it afterwards, we need your consent before we can invite you to the stage, please. So you can, I mean, you've got it, so you can feel free to send it via email. Yeah, otherwise what we will do is basically, so you can maybe see that this is a focus mode for Zoom. So basically the recording only concerns the video of the host, so Naja and I at the moment. And basically the idea is that if someone wants to join us to the stage, we will send the image consent form, so you can basically just send it back to us. You can fill it digitally if you want. Let me just fetch the link for you to download the content. So copy link. Yeah, and then we will invite you to the stage, so that if you want, either with or without video, you can also be part of the discussion with us. Naja, do you want to?
So yeah, Thomas, please, we will need very soon your form so that we're able to start the event in the format that we planned, as Adrian just explained. So hi everyone, thank you for joining our discussion about Fab City. So we'll be two animators, Adrien Rigobello, the Vice President of FREDS, who you've heard a little bit from already, and myself, Naja Gudbiar-Jamy, President of FREDS. And hopefully once the form is sorted out, we will be very happy to have Thomas Diaz as guest. So Thomas is the Executive Director of the Fab City Foundation, and he accepted today to help us understand where the Fab City is at currently and to explore its future with us. So this event was prepared ahead of time, and the theme and sense of the questions we want to tackle were shared with Thomas. The event will be structured in 5 times. We will start by asking Thomas about sustainability. We aim at discussing not only what started all this, which is the discussion of the environmental impact of the upcoming Fab City Summit, but also Fab City practices we can afford at large. Our second theme is inclusivity. So in our preparatory exchanges with Thomas, it has become obvious that one of the main arguments for organizing Fab City Summit in the Global South is one of inclusivity and de-westernization. So we like to interrogate the actions taken in this regard. The third part would tackle the design approach of the foundation. The Fab Foundation and the Fab City Initiative have been strongly advocating for science and engineering education. So we will discuss steps that can be undertaken to de-westernize this central advocacy of technology towards enhancing community and ecological resilience, since it's precisely at the core of what triggered these discussions and today's event. So finally, governance will be the last theme we look at. From a brief activity report on 4 different Fab City nodes, we will discuss the articulation of the current governance between local and global centralized actors of the network. We'd like to set this in perspective with the public mission of Fab City and its accountability towards citizens of a territory. So each of these areas will be discussed about 15 minutes, and we will conclude by defining with Thomas 3 commitments for Fab City to engage in the short term, mid-term, and long term, which is 1, 6, and 18 months. We will also need to be strict timekeepers given the number of topics we wish to discuss, even if we curated them beforehand. And however, please remember everyone can send questions in the chat, and Adrian and I will keep a lookout and convey them in the discussion at the right moments, depending on the themes we're tackling. And that's it, provided we have everything we need to start from the admin side. So I will give the word back to Adrian for our first theme, which is sustainability.
Yeah, so I will just be basically phrasing the contextualization that I defined previously for Thomas as a more broad question for everyone. And basically just, I don't know, just manifest yourself in the chat or with the reactions in Zoom if you want to have a word. I think we can do audio participation if you will. Of course, the best, I mean, basically just to let everyone know, the interest of the consent form is also so that we can basically refer what you're saying, so basically your discourse and what you're claiming, for instance, if you do claim something, to your person eventually. So otherwise we will be needing to anonymize everything in the dissemination that will follow up. So basically, and it might not be evident for everyone, I guess now when I see the names pop up, it's mainly about people that are already aware of what the Fab City movement is, but I just want to very briefly introduce what is a Fab City basically. So it's an idea that was put together in 2014 during the Fab 10 conference, so the 10th Fab Lab conference, and arguably it's even been introduced back in 2011 in Fab 7. And this is basically a joint effort between the Institute for Advanced Architecture of Catalonia, the MIT's Center for Bits and Atoms, the Fab Foundation, and the Barcelona City Council at the time, which was, I mean, the mayor at the time was Ada Colau. So basically, Fab City activities rely on the following hypothesis. Networking Fab Labs and productive third places at large within a territory would help build cities into a more resilient format. That is by being producing most of what is consumed on the territory. The objective is to have fully autonomous cities then in terms of goods production by 2054. And these are cities and economic areas also, so because we will be discussing also regions that have pledged to the Fab City Charter. The main argument of the Fab City movement lies on the advocacy for a change between a product in, trash out paradigm that we can summarize as a functioning of the economy where actors would be siloed, that is to say, isolated and self-sufficient companies, if you will, that eventually produce lots of waste linearly. The argument is then to move to a data in, data out paradigm where circular economy would be facilitated by digital synchronization of the actors, such as Fab Labs, for instance, but ultimately also, for instance, the life science industry or agriculture. Although it is easy to see that these two models are too reductionist to describe contemporary economic realities, entanglements or negotiation between actors, it does shed light on an interest of Fab City, leveraging digital capabilities and skills to act with efficacy on sustainability. And this is where one can start to wonder when the small group of persons that the Fab City Foundation actors represent have been advocating in various forms the power of the digital, which is something that has been, of course, proved in so many instances way beyond the scope of this discussion. And eventually, it's sort of, because there is this advocacy, we sort of wonder in 2022 if it's how it's arguable to organize like more than 1,500 participants conference in Bali for the Fab City conference or for the Fab City Summit that will be held with the Fab 17, with about 70% of the Fab Lab community situated in North America and Europe. And how it's something that we can justify for an immense CO2 equivalent spending, and that's of course just one metric with flights, for instance, and just continuing for that. and why it's not embraced in a more economical option with a hybrid format, with a digitally hosted conference. And I think, say, the IAC Global Summer School, for instance, or the Fab Academy format, or even the new Master and Distributed Innovation, the MDDI, that is being put up by the Fab City Foundation, rely on such formats with hybridity and distribution. So we are starting to wonder why, and if this is relevant. So if someone wants to participate,
Thomas did share the form, so we can now invite him to the stage to have some answering elements to that first point of sustainability.
Yeah. 1 second. Well, sorry, 1 second. Just need to figure out. So Peter Troxler will be joining us also to the stage, and Thomas. Up.
Perfect.
All right, so Europe, guys, if you want to up. So I just sent asks to unmute for you, Thomas. Have you got a notification? Yeah.
Peter, please go ahead.
Yeah, Thomas or Peter, if you want to intervene, that's.
We cannot hear you, Peter. I think that you're unmuted, but we cannot hear you.
Yeah. Thomas, do you want to go ahead? I see that the image has frozen. Well, that's the great power of the digital right there. I think Thomas has dropped out. He will probably join again. Yeah. Peter, are you figuring out? Yes, indeed, Francesco. That's probably a good reason.
And maybe while we fix the sound issues from Peter and the connection issue from Thomas, if you have, as a member of the Fab City network, or as people may consider going to the summit, if you have any things in mind about the CO2 footprint it represents, the costs in that size it represents, and the balance between this and attending the event, if you have any thoughts to share on this side, please, you're very welcome to add things in the chat to keep the discussion going. As Adrian underlined, the idea was also to be able to discuss with everyone to understand a little bit the feedback from people who are interested in the Fab City Foundation, the model and the proposition it carries around that issue.
Yeah, Peter, does it work?
So I think you should hear me now.
Yeah,
perfect.
Hi.
There was a piece of software missing between my microphone and Zoom, but I had to figure out first where the problem was.
Yeah.
So I was going. I'm happy that you organized this discussion this afternoon. As you might know, for a number of years, we've been organizing research papers at the Fab conferences, and we've got quite a good number of papers on Fab City, and particularly the Fab City full stack idea this year. So we're planning to hold a sort of a special panel around this. And you know, my question really isn't. You sort of alluded to that in a way that you're saying, okay, Fab City Pickup is mainly in the global Northwest, but also there. What I hear and read about Fab City at this moment, but that might just be my sort of research paper bias, is a lot of ideas, a lot of concepts, and very few actual practices. And you know, I believe that this could be one of the reasons why it doesn't translate. So I'm curious what other people here in this meeting think about that.
Yeah, indeed. So I'm just, in the meantime, I'm re-giving the rights to Thomas also, of course, because he's come back. It seems that there is, I mean, basically, of course, the Fab City functions with two levels. There is the global initiative, and then all the wealth of local initiatives, and hopefully we can. I mean, we've planned to discuss that a bit later, but it seems that there is, like, I mean, that's also something, because basically the position with Naja that we would like to have today is also to ask questions to better understand, and to better understand, for everyone to better understand what's up with that, and eventually how are the learnings in both ways working basically at these two levels to basically incentivize action and also facilitate maybe modeling or like yeah, cross areas or like cross regions learnings. I can see that Thomas has joined us again, so maybe you would like to tell us a bit about the non-hybridity of the workshop, of the summit.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. I think like the Zoom client collapsed before. Yeah, I was saying that, you know, first of all, thank you for all the effort of putting this together. I want to remind how this started. I basically received some messages from my team telling me that some kind of a surreal attack towards Fab City was happening in the social networks with very mean words, and I go and check them, and yeah, I found it like in some cases sometimes even offensive, and I remembered, I think like the only interaction that social media post had was me requesting to actually have an open conversation and have the opportunity to have an open debate about why such attacks were coming out, and also just basically asking things, you know, and asking why some decisions take place, and basically why a situation is taking a certain shape, no? So that's starting from there. I have to say that, you know, again, I appreciate the positive response to that, because we turn a public social media rant into a constructive conversation, and I think that's done with the efforts of many sides, and also I appreciate the amount of the amount of people joining the conversation, and of course, really nice to have some really known faces. I mean, I don't know where to start from, because I want to understand what's you know, making people a little bit so unpleasant about bringing the Fab Lab conference and the Fab City Summit to Southeast Asia. I wonder why this conversation didn't happen when we hosted Fab conferences closest to the West and the North. I wonder if before we raise the questions of how much people from Africa or from other places of the world would expend to go to attend to the Fab conference in Amsterdam, in Barcelona itself, and in Paris, and you know, and the more affordable and places that are near to us, as you mentioned, Adrian, where the Fab Center is, no, which is it's unequivocal. Like there is a large amount of concentration in the north and in the west of Fab Labs. No, if you look at the map of Fab Labs IO. So yeah, that's a reality in one hand, but again, I wonder why we didn't put this question and we didn't look on how many efforts people with different income level would have to make in order to attend the conferences, and how inclusive were we a few years ago when were we hosting Fab conferences when they were more convenient to us. That's one side. I mean, one question also I want to fight back. There's another thing I also had the opportunity to speak with Adrian in preparation to the event, and it was a really nice conversation. I was trying to explain the reasoning, right? Like this was not like a master plan. This is a series of coincidences that we basically try to produce the best output of it. Back, I think it was a couple of years ago, we were planning to have the Fab City Summit in Seoul. We had a really good support from the mayor of Seoul on bringing the Fab City Summit, and the Fab conference was supposed to happen in Bhutan. There was an unfortunate event that happened, which is that maybe some of you are aware of. The mayor of Seoul died, and the team of Seoul requested us to change the event to another place in Asia, since we were still in the, again, this side of the world, even though it's still not around Seoul and Bali, it's not around the corner, but we were like, okay, we're going to fill this gap and make sure that we have the opportunity to meet all together after the pandemic. And then back early this year, we had the notification that the COVID restrictions in Bhutan was not going to make possible for them to deliver the Fab conference in July. And there was, again, like a group of people crazy enough here in Bali to say, hey, we can welcome the network and organize the event here. So with the best intention possible, right? Then I understand some of the questions about, why so far from. That was also one of my responses. If you look back in the social media, it's like, far from where, right? Where is the center of the world? And I understand, like there are certain centralities in the world but maybe that's actually something to debate. So I would like to understand, are we far from where? From the majority of the Fab Labs, is that something that we want to perpetuate and keep the centrality growing? Or is a good argument to actually to push, to make efforts to decentralize? That's another question I put out there. And then also I want, maybe, some of you might be aware of, or you don't know, I've been involved in the Fab Lab network since Fab 4. So that was my first Fab conference. And usually these events had the role of going to places where there was no network, with the intention to actually plant seeds, sorry, and establish roots in places that they will need, a good push of this international network. No, and it happened in many places. And I remember, I know this very well, because that was one of the arguments that we were having with the team of MIT and Fab Foundation to bring the Fab conference to Barcelona. And they were saying, look, you usually use this conference to places where there are no Fab Labs. And then because we were organizing Fab 10, my argument was, look, we are mature enough to go beyond and actually to consolidate what we're doing in a place that I know that has been a centrality, which is Barcelona, but with the opportunity to expand what the Fab movement is. And if some of you remember, if you went to Fab 9, it was an event of 200 people, 250 maybe. And the Fab conference in Barcelona, in some point, in the weekend, it was 3,000 people. And overall, the amount of participants was over 700. So with the same spirit, I think like, the opportunity we have, not only for Indonesia, but Southeast Asia, is huge. That's what has been one of the main motivations to take the opportunity, and identify an opportunity and push for having a Fab conference in Indonesia. It's already, for me, there are so many arguments that already I'm experiencing every day on how this is an opportunity to connect with a very interesting local vibrant ecosystem, and then the organization of an event basically accelerate things. And I can say that now because I've been organizing many of them. So I don't know if some other people that has experience on doing similar things in the past, and also would like to know from people that actually has participated in enabling this ecosystem, and not only just reactive opinions about why we do things. But I truly believe, and again, like the nature of this event is gonna signify something similar that we did in Barcelona. And that's our intention, to expand what we're doing beyond, a very endogamic network, and try to compromise even more what Fab Labs can do and what Fab City can do with not only sustainability, but actually with regeneration. To take action into putting in practice regenerative design, regenerative economies. So I start with this just to finish, Adrian, and I know that I've been extending a bit. We are pushing to bring people to Bali, but I mean, if you don't come, you will have access to all the content produced in the main sessions. So people will still have the opportunity to have, to watch the recordings of the panels of the symposium. They will be produced as outputs of the event to be shared with everyone. And if you want to organize a hybrid session, we are not telling people not to do it. So anyone is welcome to organize and run by themselves a hybrid session.
I'm sorry, Thomas. So it's just to try and keep the time clear. So I think just to quickly react on what you were saying, why does it happen now in Bali? This question is also because it's 2022, and there is a raising concern, especially after the 6th IPCC report. Especially when also it's a movement, like I was introducing, that cares at core about sustainability, that has embraced before methods which can be argued, of course, methods that are hybrid. I mean, there is an intrinsic, if I may say so, and please pardon me if it sounds a bit too judgy or pejorative, but it seems a bit schizophrenic to be advocating for hybridity and actively having it. I mean, you and your team have experience with this in terms of organizing hybrid events worldwide, and now, I mean, Bali is also very, it's very, like, the symbol of Bali is very strong. I mean, it's a holiday place for many Western people, right? But I think Naja had a question to.
I have a few more comments because I think Peter and Thomas, both your comments are very interesting in the inclusivity panel that we'd like to tackle just after. But before we move on to that, I would like to state a few numbers on the sustainability aspect, because what you've said, Thomas, although very powerful, has to be balanced with some data. And we've done a few calculations on what it would mean for the Fab City network to be organized to Bali in terms of CO2 emissions. So the average cost of a round trip to Bali from cities of the network is 1.6 ton of CO2. And we've done this based on the UN calculation simulator and on the list of cities that are in the network. So we could go into more detail regarding how many people come from where in the Fab City, and we could tweak our model very easily to have a more realistic aspect. But the point is, in our calculation now, it's 1.6 ton of CO2 per person, and you're expecting 500 persons. The expected emissions of citizens, so that we stay below the 2-degree thresholds, is 2 tons per year. So as a Westerner, if you fly to Bali for the summit, you're left with 400 kilos of CO2 for a year. Knowing that currently in the Western world, it's very hard to reduce food-related emissions to less than 400 kilos, that emissions related to public services are between 250 kilos and a ton, related to heating are again several hundred kilos as well per year, and we're not even counting emissions from the fashion consumption or the digital consumption that one person has. And this is from the environmental agency for environment, the European agency, sorry. So for the Bali round trip, if we look at the numbers, you are bound to overstep the emission thresholds that is recommended by the expert by at least 50%. And you might say it's worth it, and it's exactly what we want to discuss when I'm finished with the few numbers. But we have to put this in perspective with one core thing, which is that CO2 emissions are not equally shared. And so when doing this, in particular for the Westerners that come to Bali, it's because we are already in a position of privilege that enables us to overstep that threshold. And we're in a position of privilege in comparison to poorer people of our generation, but that's not it. We're also in a position of privilege to people of younger generation. You might say that 3 tons a year is not that much instead of 2, because for example, the American average is over 15 tons a year, which is huge. But even a comparatively small overstep has consequences on what younger generations will have to face. There is a study that shows that people born after 2017, which are your children or children, if and when we have them, not later generation, directly our children, they will have to respect a much lower thresholds if we don't hold ours. The study shows that for our children's generation, it would probably be 0.8 ton a year. And it's likely that they will not face, like us, with a choice, should I try to stick with 2 or can I go up to 3? They will have to stick with 0.8 given their current climatic situation. So anyone traveling to Bali from the Western world for the summit, and in doing so overstepping that threshold, because there is no other way of traveling there currently, is very literally taking something from someone else. And our question is, looking at it like this, is it really is it still acceptable to organize an event without even offering the possibility of an hybrid format, or by pushing the responsibility of organizing an hybrid format towards participants and other members of the network, as you just suggested we might do? And as the head of Fab City, are you actually ready to take a responsibility like this when faced with such numbers?
I would just like, I'm sorry, just to complete what Nadja was saying. So we can see in the chat that Sidney has made a really interesting point, which is to say, usually the cities or like local actors within cities are pitching for hosting the events. And of course, like you were introducing, Thomas, this one is different also in that. And of course, the legitimacy of holding it in Bali is questioned also by this means. But I mean, please, if you want to react maybe in 2 minutes to what Nadja was saying, and then we can move on.
First thing to say is that what is interesting is that I think like our target numbers are going to have a minority participation from people from the West, which is great news, actually, and especially, let's say it's great news. So this is going to give also a lot of opportunity for people from the area to be, again, in direct connection. Nothing beats physical interaction, and I know that we depend of a broken energetic system, but it is what it is, and it's something like we cannot escape to that. In relationship of the legitimacy. I'm sorry, but yeah, I don't know how to take this comment. I understand that for maybe some people, it's really difficult to understand the energy that it takes to put things like this together, or to start a project like Fab City from nothing and then make it grow and consistently, from over 10 years, keep it growing. And it's really easy as well to to point and try to compare it with what it should be, right? What it should be. Is this it should be like a completely open democratic process. It should be a totally sustainable. And in some point, you end up being in this kind of paralysis because you're trying to push yourself to be, in a way, a bit of a fundamentalist on certain things, while the rest of the world is operating within the paradox, which is being in a transition, right? So I think it's when you are in trying to make things happen, this is a recurring issue. It's like where is the boundary? Should I accept money from I don't know, from an oil company to do something good for humanity or not? Should I use my carbon credit to go to Bali, or should I leave it to some influencer to go and use it for me and take pictures naked in some Balinese temple? Should I don't know, like the question is like, should I use a computer because it's all that it's all based on unethical practices in supply chains and also in labor? Again, like where do we put the boundaries? And I want to keep this very clear, like this is not a decision that you take in your couch, in your comfortability of your place, but it's actually these decisions when you are on the field are different. When you are trying to make things happen in places where you know, you don't have certain basic things covered, is different. When it matters a lot, having the right resources and the right opportunity to put certain things in value is very different. So in some point, I think like we're gonna keep discussing, but I think in some point we're gonna have to really recognize that we're judging from a totally different points of view. I am from Venezuela. I've been living in Europe for 14 years. I'm living back in the periphery, which is I'm very happy to be back actually, you know, to the tropics. And it's completely different system of judgment and system of values, and we have to recognize that. And then you can be sitting in a very comfortable situation and say what everyone else should do. Believe me, in practice, in the rest of the world, it's not like that. But,
yeah, Thomas, I'm just sorry. It's just to move on. I think Francesco had wanted to intervene. Maybe Francesco, your co-host, so you can unmute. Yeah, please.
Yeah. Hello. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. How much time I have, Adrian?
Maybe 2 minutes, if that's okay with you.
2 minutes. Okay, I'll try to make it. First of all, I need I have two disclaimers. The first is that I'm a bit emotional about these topics, so pardon me if I'm going too far. I'm maybe less objective or prepared than Thomas, which seems to be very rational. The second disclaimer is that my longest and heaviest CO2 travel I did in my life was to attend a Fab event in Santiago. So it was not in Bali, but it was in Santiago, and nobody raised those questions at the time. But still, I traveled there. And the other thing I wanted to say is that on one side, I also felt a bit skeptical, or when the Bali Fest was announced. I don't think I'm traveling there, but I mean, I also had somehow the reaction that Naja and Adrian had, and that led us to this conversation. So I'm not. I'm understanding, you know, what's behind this. But even if I'm understanding, what I'm seeing here today and also in the social media promotion is some people, so Naja and Adrian, who are making a sort of process or try, like I don't know if process is the right word in English. Procès, is it a process? Like you know, with a jury. Is this correct? Trial, right? Okay, yeah. Okay, yeah. So this looks like a trial to me. So some people that are debating if what some other people are doing is correct or could be done better. And with the trial, I always have problems because I need to see what's behind this trial. What is the alternative proposition that is being made? Because if not, without any alternative proposition that is, let's say, put on the side of the trial, I mean, this looks really like fundamentalism, which seems to be okay. We should stop doing everything, because do something today consumes CO2, or almost everything. So basically, we should stop doing anything, and basically we will end up with the end of the world in, I don't know, 10 years, 20 years, maybe. I don't know what the scientific prediction are done. are saying about that. So I'm very skeptical about this, let's say, trial and judging approach. And but still, if you, I appreciate the effort that are being done for this discussion. The only thing is that there are two aspects that made this trial very problematic and imperfect. So I would like to propose two things that we forgot. The first is the magnitude, and the second is the quantity of energy. So the magnitude is, okay, we are consuming with the Bali event, I don't know how many tons. Naja did this calculation that is super useful. I think that as you know, Adrian and Naja, when you approach a problem from a scientific point of view, the first things to do is to define the magnitude. So we should see this amount of CO2 compared to the CO2 emissions of the world or the oil industry, for instance. I mean, without this calculation for me doesn't mean nothing at all, and it brings the conversation to a very schizophrenic and polarized and very dangerous place, and this is super dangerous for me, and it can be easily attacked. The second point is the energy. How much energy are we using to host this conversation and this trial? A lot. Social media, time. I'm being here while on COVID, in vacation with my family. Thomas, I mean, everyone has a lot of things to do. We are using this energy to basically make a trial to a project that is trying to change things. I'm wondering why aren't we using, is it optimized to use this energy for this, or should we use it for, I don't know, make another project that is more sustainable, or I don't know, make a trial to the oil industry or something like this? Is this efficient? Because basically what we are discussing with CO2 is the efficiency of energy, and I'm sure that this use of energy today is not efficient.
Thank you, Francesco.
I can go on.
Yeah, thank you, Francesco. I can see that you raised your hand, Thomas. I'm sorry, because we need to move on to the next topic, and we've got 4 topics that.
I'm sorry. I just want, if you allow me to make just one comment, very quick.
Quickly, please.
This is not a trial because there is not like any legal system that I am accepting beforehand to be judged by anyone. This is a conversation between equals. Absolutely. This is not, you know, someone in Europe judging what everyone else is doing in the rest of the world. The world has changed, if you don't, so this cannot be a trial in that sense. It could be 200 years ago, but not anymore.
Yeah, thank you, Thomas. And indeed, the aim is not to have a trial, to have a conversation on alternatives, actually. So we might start with harsh numbers, but the point, and in particular the topics of the rest of the conversation, are designed so that we're able to discuss, well, if we don't go to Bali to do that, do we have any other alternatives for Fab City events like this one and for Fab City in general to function? I will just make a very brief comment on the number. Francesco, you raised the problem of the point of comparison. The point of comparison in our case is precisely giving experts how much you can spend as a person. So we have a point of comparison towards not the industry, but as individual, how we decide to act. I could also say that we've compared the data that we have with how much it would cost in terms of CO2 to do a series of Zooms. So we could also argue, and we could also give you the data over how much this very Zoom costs and why it might probably be worth spending actually very little CO2 in relationship to that. I could expand a lot on the numbers because we have them there. I'm not sure it's the most interesting thing to do to start arguing over there. However, there's one thing I would like to raise, which I think is very important, is that as members of Fab City, we're actually doing those calculations, that at some point when deciding where and when to organize a place, we're aware of the numbers and of these comparisons. So maybe I spend a lot of time on these calculations, and I'm kind of torn between really going into details toward what you said, Francesco, but I truly believe it's not the main aim. However, I would really like to stay in relation on this and to have more numbers put in the Slack. So this is really for the numbers and the sustainability part, but as we raised, the point was a lot more to discuss. Well, the point to go there is to be exposed to a number of other things and to enable people that are far away from us to go there. So inclusivity. And in that sense, Thomas, we would like to ask, has been underlined. The Fab conferences happened before in Pune, India, in El Gunya, Egypt, and in Pretoria, South Africa. So there is experience with going away from the North. And we'd like to learn a little bit more on how the Fab Lab and the Fab City movements have matured in inclusivity as a worldwide movement from organizing conferences in countries with considerable local inequalities. So you have a lot of experience from past events on this. So how have you leveraged that experience in organizing Bali? And we're interested in some particular questions on this, like how do you choose local NGOs and actors to work with there to engage with the Indonesian context during FAB 17? What's the specific action plan on that inclusivity issues that you implement? We have a slightly harsher question. Okay, then maybe let's start with this, which is how exactly have you learned from previous editions and how are you implementing this now for Bali?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question. And as I said before, I've been attending, but also contributing more actively into organizing FAB events for quite some time. I can give you one example or a couple of examples. I think like the event in Pune in India afterwards led to the growth of the local Fab Lab network. And maybe that was if you make a stretch, you then understand why there is such a vibrant community in Kerala. In a different way, again, like it's a local interpretation of Fab Labs. Is connected with an innovation efforts at the national, at the regional level, and is connected also with the development of a super lab. No? So you start to you follow the lines, and then you end up finding out that there is some kind of a seed planted that is ended up on a kind of a regional development in the state of Kerala in the south of India that was based on Fab 5, which was Pune. No? One of the most significant ones for me, and the one that I live very closely, has been the Fab event, Fab 7 in Peru, in Lima. Because that was a project in which I was deeply involved. We fundraised money from IAC and Fab Lab Barcelona, fundraised money from the Spanish cooperation to support a new approach to international cooperation, in which we will not be doing like a typical job of NGOs, which is basically perpetuating the dependency of the people that you provide the help with the people that provides the help. That's how cooperation usually works. But actually, we were doing like a very deep technological transfer effort, no? And then we got the funds to set up Fab Lab in Peru and in Ethiopia, actually, and then which also supported not only with the machines but the training for identifying the local leadership, and then in the case of Peru, followed by the organization of the Fab conference. Out of that program, Beno Juarez and Victor Freund were the local champions, and these people, together with the Fab 7 event, were not even impactful at the Peruvian level, but they are the seeds that have somehow spread all over Latin America, right? And this event has been the event together with the, I would say, the nature and the leadership qualities of these people that were part of this program have been made possible to grow the Fab Lab network in Latin America. No? I think those are two examples which actually somehow some kind of drives the motivation of looking at Indonesia. Right now, there are 4 Fab Labs. It's different from the Philippines, which has over 20. In Indonesia, there was one of a very interesting first Fab Labs in the country that unfortunately now is on standby. Was in the House of Natural Fiber, actually set up also with the Dutch cooperation and the support of VAC Society. Peter, I think you might remember that back in the time. Unfortunately, they are idle, but they're kind of a new breed of Fab Labs coming up, really trying to connect with industry, right? And again, it's a different approach on how to set up Fab Labs from usually what we maybe think on that happens in Europe and elsewhere, no? And also what we have been doing a lot of exercises on trying to understand why is this, no? This is a very fast growing economy in which things get very easily kind of divided. I do this for money, I do this for learning, I do this for entertainment, no? So we have seen that there is a huge opportunity here to combine, I would say, like a global approach with a local need especially from the people that we have been working with, and not only in Bali, but in Indonesia, to find like an alternative way in which these things mix and not necessarily are separated. No, so the event again, like I just quickly to finalize, and I see when you unmute. I have to also remind that this event is not an alien planted by Fab City Foundation and MIT in Bali. It comes also from a local partnership that involves local players and that involves Indonesian people that are working every day for the last few months on trying to make this happen, and also with local funding. No, so yeah, it's quite an interesting local energy to bring the event, which otherwise it wouldn't be possible to make it happen.
So one of the questions of Naja was also which are these players? Because for instance, intervening in a, let's say in a remote precarious area, and I mean we can arguably say that methods of the Fab Labs and eventually the idea of the Fab City being resilience, autonomy, education to stand for that matter eventually to empower the communities, whatever this verb may encompass. It needs to be eventually, I mean, it can be also most leveraged for the more precarious people. And I can see that Paula Echeverri Montes, who's also a member of FREDS, has been asking a question. So she's based in Bogota. And I think this meets also somehow what she has been asking in the chat, basically, how, like with which actor and with which methods do you ensure and do you measure also the proper actions of intervention? Because it's not any technical institute that is already meant for people that have the means to be there, and that may be academics also, which are often in a different social class to the people that actually need these implementations. Yeah, so I mean, basically, who are these actors and how is the action monitored? And maybe maybe in the case also of South America can be interesting.
Yeah, I think that Paula should meet Beno and Victor and all the team from Fab Lab Lima and see how the implementation of Fab Labs in Latin America have happened. I cannot say that it's like a fully successful story, but definitely it gives you hints on that it is not, again, like not just an alien technology just coming, but it's actually, there is a lot of work, for instance, from Walter Gonzalez, which most of you know. He makes the show in every Fab conference, but he's local Peruvian artisan, and he has kind of create this intersection between crafts and digital fabrication in a very interesting way, in a very powerful way. A guy that is powered. I'm not saying like that did some kind of crafts here and there. No, it's a guy that publishes books and that has a lot of patents registered on this topic. No, in relationship with the local players, we are working in a highly deeply rooted with the Balinese reality. We have both like here's like a very hierarchical. I don't know if if you're familiar with the way things run in Asia, but you maybe saw that during the COVID pandemic, the pandemic, right? Like it's like a lot of hierarchies. Like the government says something and people will do it most of the time, different from other places in the world. So there is like this involvement of the government of Bali itself, right? Which actually gives that kind of access to all levels of communities. There is work that we're doing with a local, again in Bali, with a local organization called Beat Hub, and they're working with banjars. I don't know if you're familiar on how society is organized in Bali, but it's quite interesting, and it's something that we could learn. I'm going to say we, the West, should learn from Bali. Is that there is a banjar is formed of between 30 and 50 families, and they occupy a territory, and they have complete agency over the territory, and they decide things together. And they decide things together not with democracy of 51% that leaves the other half fucked up, but actually they decide with full consensus, for instance. No? So everybody should agree in things that are going to be done in the territory. That's for instance, we're working with an organization that is working with these banjars that usually are organized around all the traditional things related with religion and and culture and arts, and there is a technology component coming there. We are working also with a plastic exchange. You should know it. You should check it. This is a local movement on activating these vineyards to collect the plastic and to turn it in some cases. There has been in the past the exchange of plastic waste, which is a big issue. Indonesia is one of the top 10 waste producers in plastics, and they're trying to create a trade system between plastic waste and food and bioproducts and other type of initiatives, evolving from the trade that was done before between plastic and money, no? And then together with this, it's an open event. We're going to have we're working now with the Ministry of Tourism and Creative Economy and trying to cover and lower the fees for the locals quite a lot more. Also, we're working with companies on funding themselves the tickets for the locals, as well as having one of the days totally open and for free, which is going to be the Thursday, 20th of October. Just to name some, no? And then we will have local open calls. There is a local micro grants to support the movement of people from within Indonesia to come and participate as well.
Yeah, thank you. So this is really interesting. I think there are two aspects I'd like to. So moving on to the third point of the discussion, to the design philosophy. So I think you are pointing to really interesting context where, and that's something that you've been also you as the team with the Fab City Foundation and the movement before have been shedding light on, which is the aspect of community. And one thing that we found problematic with Naja when we studied the Fab City movement in 2019 in an article for Fab 15, and that many people have been studying also is basically the in terms of also still in terms of inclusivity. So I can quote the 2017 article by Vasilis Niaros, who's part of the board of the Fab City Foundation now. And basically what is identified with a survey is that there was a lack of racial and gender diversity because there is a high threshold for participation in the maker community, even though it feeds on open resources or like the idea of open sourcing, open resources and so on. So basically this is interesting because it's pointing to two things. So basically knowledge sets like STEM and so on. And eventually it points also to something else, which is basically the digital inclination of the overall technocentric movement. And when I say technocentric, it's also to be balanced with what you were just saying, Thomas, because although there is a high, there is a technocentrism in the whole discourse, there is always technology to develop something before community being worked on, let's say. But so eventually, I think that there are like just three numbers or like three ideas that I'd like to situate this digital focus also on. So basically now 63% of the world population in 2022 has access to digital infrastructures. So that's a lot, but that's also not everyone. And of course, the 37% that is left is the most precarious people, because this is population and not territory, right? There is also an interesting point, and so the Fab conference went to Pretoria before, so South Africa. So South Africa in 2021 suffered from 30% of the time suffered from load shedding, so they did not have electricity, and that's a country that is considered part of the economic north. So that's the most developed country on the African continent. And even now, if we bring that to a case that is a bit more contemporary, let's say, we can testify, and we've been reading a lot with Naja because we are French, of course, that France has been reportedly suffering from record heat waves. I think that's the third one at the moment. And that's, of course, one of the countries suffering from that. And for instance, with relation to electric power, it's not been able to operate fully and at necessary capacity its nuclear powers and at large the power plants. So basically now France, who's been a country which has been a country that was a net provider, supplier of electricity in Europe, now is a net importer of electricity in Europe. So basically, there is the technocentrism that is a deeply Western idea, and of course, MIT is at the West, right? And there is this, the technical schemes, the technical ideas and energy paradigms that the idea of both Fab City and the Fab Lab movement relies upon. And it seems like, when presented upon this, which is not facts that we sort of bring that are new, it's basically all over the news, it's just like a small selection of them. Does the paradigm for the design system that the Fab City Foundation defend now, is it still relevant? Is it not a bit obsolete? And that's not to be on trial and saying, "Ooh, that's bad," because of course we are now on a digital infrastructure with this Zoom call. But that's rather to point to other methods and eventually other parts of the experience of Fab City over the past more than 10 years, if we come back to 2011. So basically, where are the points that we should keep and enhance, and should we eventually mature out of this technocentric paradigm that we ask the question, maybe obsolete now?
Yeah, I feel like it's something I keep repeating on lately, and I think that it's good to share. Again, is that to put it as a metaphor, no, I agree with the positioning of Fab Labs. Too often is very technocentric, right? And the metaphor that I'm referring to is like Fab City is trying to ask people to say, stop looking at the machine, look outside the walls of your building, look what is happening around you. And that's somehow like the provocation of Fab City is trying to engage Fab Labs in a bigger purpose that is not only creating technology for the sake of technology, but actually engaging with the actual problems that are around you. But not only that, nowadays, it's actually engaging with the planetary challenges that we have. Well, and I think that's where Fab City as a global initiative have the potential to raise this awareness at two levels. No, one with the politicians, no, and the top-down approach, which I'm experiencing here every day. I'm talking with cities that are going to join on the Fab City network from Indonesia, and talking also from local makers, people are machine makers. For instance, we found there's a big issue with supply chains because customs imports are very expensive in Indonesia. And we have seen that has fostered some local machine makers, which are kind of building local infrastructure for people to produce things locally. And it's this kind of a connection between the two that, that's where our efforts are basically centered. But the challenge now is, I want to be very clear. We understand that this is, Fab City can only develop isolated cities being self-sufficient, and no matter what, is actually introducing a planetary awareness. What is the level of the problem? And again, I have to say that for me, maybe some of the reactions in relationship of hosting the event in Bali were out of tone because first of all, there is a context. And second of all, when we actually I'm starting to see the numbers now, and we might end up having just not even a couple hundred of people coming from overseas, and most of the people locally, which is also going to help to boost and to launch a very interesting, potentially an interesting local innovation program based on distributed manufacturing, distributed production of energy. We're going to have distributed production of food. We're going to have a lot of local representatives of people producing energy, people producing food, which makes a lot of sense in an archipelago like Indonesia, which is 17,000 islands and it's 260 million people, right? So that's other reason. It's like, Indonesia could be like a massive prototype for distributed production systems using local infrastructure and local capacity, So that's where, that's where we start to connect the dots and say, okay, this is a great opportunity. This is a great way to, to put out a narrative that, and not only put out a narrative, but also experiencing it, right? See how this can become the event, which we're organizing in 10 days. It's a 10-day event. We made it longer for people to justify more their travel. If they're going to travel not come from a weekend to Bali, of course, but come and stay longer. We invite people to stay 1 or 2 months, which is possible in relationship to the visa regulations, for instance. But also it's kind of like the kickstart of something that we hope that is more permanent, no? And then within the event, we're going to be hosting the Fab Island Challenge, which is also like we are making an extra effort, not just bringing people and playing with a 3D printer and drilling with a PowerPoint to others, but actually engage them. We're going to pair people like, I don't know, Manu Prakash from Stanford or Cesar Harada doing hydrogen production in the ocean, with local initiatives from universities and from makers, and trying to go out there and test things on the real world, right? Which is a big stretch and a big effort, but we want also to launch like a new message of what is possible within this innovation ecosystem. And then Adrian, just very quickly, and sorry, just I want to make just a very, also for the sake of context, people to understand, we launched Fab City as an idea in 2011. It became something more public in 2014 with the mayor of Barcelona, Xavier Trias. After came Ada Colau, but it was Xavier Trias by the time. And then it became something that organically grew. And only in 2019, in January 2019, we have established the Fab City Foundation. So the first person ever hired by Fab City, I think, starts in 2020 or 2021, which there's that. There's like maybe we might be making some mistakes, but we are young as an organization, and I just want to raise awareness of that. Is because some people might think that we have been living with €2 million budget per year for the last 11 years. That's not true, not even now. So it has been something that has been built over the personal effort of many people.
Yeah, maybe just on this aspect, I mean, it's also the fact that it's I mean, you yourself as a person that represents also the discourse and embodies the discourse in many occasions where you're invited, and that's the role that you've been endorsing voluntarily, plus all the other persons that have been involved. I mean, it's also a very influential discourse that, I mean, there is a difference between a Fab Lab movement where people are volunteer passing the door and going for a training, paying eventually a subscription to a space and so on. And when eventually you're on the Fab, when you're involved in the Fab City, it's de facto you're in a territory which has decided, where you voted eventually also, but right, and then it's up to the citizen to get involved for the local politics. But eventually, I mean, when you imagine an area like the Greater Paris, for instance, where there are like millions of people, millions of topics also that are local and global at the scale of what is acting like a country, eventually at the scale at which it structured. Eventually, the people are concerned by the topic by the territory, and by the geography, and by the local institutions, and eventually both by EU fundings that have been related to, I mean, it's basically advertised in the Fab City website now, so people can go consult that if they are not aware of it. But basically, the Fab City movement have been also developed thanks to EU fundings, which are basically taxpayers, if I'm being simple about it. And there was, I don't know if there is still, but there was someone paid full-time as a project manager in the Paris City Hall for Fab City, for developing Fab City. So, I mean, this is again, taxpayer and a bit more direct. So, I mean, there is a different level of accountability that is expected from the movement. And I mean, basically the question that we ask, and that's what we've been asking since 2019 with Naja, is also, does the link to the Fab Foundation, like, is it even relevant? And I'm not sure that it's a tie, that it's a relation that is absolutely relevant, considering the very heterogeneous objects that a Fab City and a Fab Lab is, and the methods like we've been discussing. So I'm sorry, maybe it's productive to move on to the topic of governance.
May I just jump in with just one remark? With the Fab Lab research papers, we've been heavily active studying the social side of Fab and promoting a more holistic thinking than just a technocratic approach. And this has been embraced in the Fab conferences for certainly since Yokohama, since Fab 9. Mm-hmm. So I think you need to take that into account, that we have been pushing this notion of fabbing is also social, and it's worthwhile studying it from a social science perspective. Initially, this was a push, but the Fab Foundation eventually embraced the idea and is actively encouraging that we continue that work. Mm-hmm. So I expect a similar development in the Fab City context. However, the Fab City context is much younger than the Fab conferences. So, you know, we need to bring in a critical discussion, but put that critical discussion also into perspective.
Yeah, I mean,
and you know, that's a job we're starting to do now in the context of the Bali event.
Yeah, I mean, there are. I mean, I think you're very right in pointing this out, because this is critical resources for whoever is interested in these aspects. And I mean, similarly to the study of Vasilis Niaros, there have been studies, actually recent studies, that have been published on surveying the ecological inclination of design practices in the Fab Labs. So that's not Fab City, that's a different context, but it's tied for now, we may say. And actually, I think I've seen, preparing this here, I've seen 2 studies, at least journal articles, so like extended studies, talking about these aspects, so reviewing also the social aspects. And I mean, it's clear that the Fab Lab movement now, and it hasn't been, you know, making, unless if we're not aware of it, then please feel free to flag that or to bring contents. But basically, what we've seen so far is that there has been studies saying that there is a higher barrier to entry, basically, to the Fab Lab. And eventually, I mean, if I'm being plain about that, like a baker should be able to use GitHub. A baker should be able to come and design their own 3D printer based on the idea of the Fab Lab, maybe because they follow the Fab Academy, which is something that needs to be paid eventually, right? Legitimately, because it salaries people that are doing some work. But eventually, I mean, there is an overall issue of affordance and that is also tied to the technocentrism of the Fab movement. And I mean, that goes along with, you know, this set of catalog techniques and softwares and design practices that are advocated by the Fab Lab movement, and not just advocated, but, you know, recommended as a like worldwide set of tools for some reasons, like reproducibility of making and so on. The thing is, it's also like a colonialist act. I mean, we cannot see the technique as purely beneficial or purely objective. It's not objective, and we can. I mean, I've been amazed in Fab 15 to see that actually in South America, I can't remember which country specifically, but we've seen, or I've seen in various countries actually, practices where people were mixing craftsmanships, like traditional craftsmanships and craft knowledge with these technologies. But it's also in a way standardized and in a Western perspective that is little discussed, I feel. So eventually, you know, the Fab Lab movement has been on for a long time. I don't know, 20 years plus. Fab City has been an idea that is developing for more than 10 years, even though it's young as a proper institution. But like, it's been there, and projects, EU-funded projects have already closed that were related to that. So eventually, like, there was resources used for that, and I think there isn't much that has been acted upon with regards to not the critics, but even just the studies that have been conducted. Please, Thomas.
No, I want to make a small comment because this could be very misleading. I want to show you, if you go to the medium of, when you refer to the EU projects and projects that are close, I guess maybe you're mentioning about reflow, maybe, and how Fab City has benefited from it. I have to tell you that it's totally the opposite. If you look at the Fab City medium, there is this is a very interesting way also to explain a little bit why we have a foundation, right? Like the Fab City grew like a network, as a network of cities very organically. So we have the Fab City network. There was a Fab City collective, which is still like it's supposed to be the place where more horizontal peer-to-peer decisions are made, but it's constantly trying to find its shape. You know how difficult is to organize truly horizontal organizations. I think that Paris had been living a little bit of that challenge as well. And then we created the Fab City Foundation to have some kind of a organization for all of that and get funds and etc. So Fab City Foundation hasn't benefited of any of these EU projects that you can call, not even Reflow or Centrino, for instance, which the two projects are deeply based in the whole Fab City ideals. In the case of Reflow, even more, I can tell you, like it has been like a total, I'm not going to tell too much details, but it is something to take to justice, even the way in which certain organizations took over the knowledge of Fab City and appropriated it and basically misguided the whole approach that we wrote, because I wrote that project together with a group of people that later on were kicked out by some organization. I'm not going to say the name. It's totally the opposite. It actually play against Fab City interest. When we use the power of the collective efforts, we wrote together, the base of the Reflow project in a previous effort to apply for a European funding. And now in the case of Centrino, we're trying to bring it together. No? So I just want to make sure that Fab City Foundation hasn't benefited at all from any of your taxes yet. Maybe it will happen in the future.
Yeah, sure. So just to I explained where I came from to make the link. I was probably referring to the idea of Fab City, right? Explicitly tied, exactly like you presented. The Fab City movement is not the Fab City Foundation, and I think that's also the background for this discussion and where the topic comes from. So eventually, when I say Fab City has benefited from it, it's also that Fab City got partly the idea of Fab City, got funds, got resources that were and an institutional recognition, so that eventually it could develop and people could spend time on it and develop methods. So that's what I meant. But I understand what you're saying.
Not really. It's not like that. I mean, it's the other way around. It's like Fab City people with, using their free time, not paid time, have made enough efforts to raise the attention of institutions as important as the European Union, let's say, to name something. But the benefit back, the recognition, you play with it, right? Like you use it and maybe you can, I don't know, get access to certain funding because that recognition exists. But the direct funding, let's say, attached to that is very difficult to measure. I would say that it's not that straightforward, I would say, but just to not make it longer.
So I think this actually extension of the third point was actually pointing to governance, and just with the idea of taking of staying in the time that we define with everyone. Nadja is going now to present when you made the commitments part. And if someone has any question with regards to governance, any comment, please feel free to either raise your hand or send the comment in the chat, please.
Okay, so in regards to the commitments, there have been a series of things in the discussion towards inclusivity, sustainability, and the design philosophy of Fab City that link towards what could be done. And the point of our discussion was precisely to be able to discuss alternatives or pushing forward some of the things that have been mentioned. So that's for one side, the commitments ideas come from this, and from the other thing. So Adrian has briefly mentioned this 2054 goal of the Fab City initially, but IPCC's most recent report highlighted this year that our civilization has 3 very short years to still act with impact on climate change. And so the display of that doomsday clock on the Fab City website, which points to 31 years, is a given vision and thresholds, but we were also interested in the very near time. And this is also, Thomas, where we were interested in commitments that are short-term, mid-term, and longer-term in light of that IPCC number, which are 1 month, 6 months, and 18 months. So Thomas, maybe you would like to start, and depending on your comments, we can also come back to specific points of the discussion that could be leveraged into further work within the Fab City. So please.
My question is, what type of commitments you mean? Because some commitments to respond to your positioning towards the sustainability issues raised in relationship to Fab City, or commitments that we are willing to take from the point of view of our work?
Well, we believe that some commitments towards sustainability are very important, and so we would be interested if you have some in mind. But if you believe with your vision of what Fab City is and should become, that there are other more pressing stuff, we're super interested in hearing those as well. So not only related to sustainability, but more generally in what you hope to do with Fab City.
Yeah, let me start with the long term. Our commitment for the long term, and I have to say that maybe it's even mid-term, but long term, is to make Fab City more relevant in the global south and put more emphasis and more focus in the global south. And that's something that you are gonna see that, you know, slowly we're gonna be taking there, and that we're making small steps towards that direction.
Can you explain what this encompasses, please?
This encompasses on trying to bring and build Fab City implementations like we're doing in Indonesia, but also doing in other southern territories in Africa and Latin America, which are not only a replication of what's being done in the north and the west, but actually start to be built from truly local ecosystems. And I have to say that I would invite this back to some comment that I forgot to say before. No, like I think like a truly efforts on engaging in doing significant change for the world, I think entails going out of certain bubbles. And again, I go back to my comment of implementation outside of the frameworks that we're used to see in certain environments. It's completely different. So if we manage to crack these challenges in the global south, where there are not institutions, where there are not the kind of the comforts conditions that we could see in other places of the world, especially in the north and the west, I think then we can have like a truly powerful and meaningful implementations of Fab City. So it's a beautiful challenge, I have to say. That's what I mean. And Indonesia is going to be a test.
Yeah, I'm sorry, because I will be a bit pushy on this, because to me, it's not about inspiring or giving a direction. It's 18 months. In 18 months, when we meet again, maybe, hopefully, or at least we can trigger something. Can we tell us what we will be able to see? So cities, countries, institutions, metrics, and when because implementing a Fab City is, you know, in a way it's convincing an institution to have one signatory for the Fab City Charter, but which are the metrics? What is this going to do for the Global South in like specific areas? What is this going to be measured? What are we going to measure?
It's just going in the direction of Fab City is doing, decreasing the amount of kilometers that products travel to get into people, increasing the capacity to produce locally food, and increasing the capacity to produce energy using renewable sources. And I see like not only doing that. Sorry?
Has this been done in any Fab City now? You have measures and metrics?
No.
Including Barcelona?
Including Barcelona.
So like, is this a methodological problem, or like what is like, there may be something to, I mean, and we can conclude, sorry, not conclude, but extend this discussion further and work together with the community to improve that. It's not to
when you go from theory to implementation, then you end up knocking the door of a city officer, and then the city officer is gonna try to avoid you to get the certain amount of data or give you a clear response, because the truth is that they don't have the data. when you realize that a lot of that data, I'm talking about cases like the Barcelona one, actually they're not even regulated, and most of them belong to the private sector, then you realize that actually that's, at the conditions in which we are today in the data governance model, that's almost impossible to have like a truly measured inputs and outputs at the city level, right?
Thomas, if I agree on this, it's an interesting point, and I agree that, I mean, very obviously, it's also what Peter was saying when he was saying we push for more social science studies within the Fab City network, that this is something obviously important and that would be extremely relevant. There is a series of data and of information, not only numbers, but more largely studies of how Fab City is unfolding in localities. If I may very briefly, I know it's super hard. I mean, if you ask anyone that is doing social sciences, sociology, they will have exactly the same reaction than you, saying, well, obviously there are a lot of people that do not want to share that kind of data. But the point of social science methodologies is that there are a huge number of researchers that have been able to develop methodologies, and we're kind of a little pushing on this because this is something we're super interested in pushing in Fab City. So there might be some things done towards this, even though it has been difficult, and we completely acknowledge this.
Nadia, I'm a UCL PhD dropout funded by Intel in big data. And because basically it was disappointing to read the many amount of papers which like take a snapshot of a phenomenon, an observation, and that was making so many conclusions about what actually could happen, which I understand is part of the research methods, but I can tell you definitely, I don't think that that's the solution, to be honest. I believe that it's more towards the data governance models is where I see that, when we're able to really have access and understand the way in which data flows happen into a city, in a region, or in a specific town, and that we are collecting the right amount of data, and that we're not just taking a snapshot, right? And it's almost like a permanent observation, and that's a real challenge. That is, I can say that maybe, I don't know, the more authoritarian regimes might have a very clear idea of that. In North Korea, you maybe have a really good way to measure the inputs and outputs, but in the rest of the world, it's quite a mess.
But it's not about, that's precisely the thing. It's not about data. It's about being able to tell the stories of what Fab City does. And it's not only about, let's count how many white or minority people or whatever come in the Fab Labs and count how much they have to pay to be able to access there, and how many are able to really change their future about doing this, or any other of these sort of basic numbers that you would maybe want to look at. It's also about more broadly talking to people, and there was and again, being able to tell a story based on some of these data, and also based on what you have been able to witness in a sense. And this is why I was calling out to sociology, because there's a lot of method in sociology that's related not only to being able to manipulate numbers, but also on how you're able to observe a field and tell some things about it. I think in anthropology, we could also tell some things about the method they use in order to do this. And very briefly, there was a question in the governance part about the amount of information that is available and shaped about what Fab City does. And from what you've been saying and from what we've seen in the chat, I get the feeling that there is an immense number of things that I'm not part of the Fab City, and there seems to be an immense number of things that I'm not aware of that would be fascinating to leverage in pushing Fab City forward and in telling what Fab City is. And I think our question, and we're pushing towards this, is also to figure out, is there something to take away from these anthropology or sociology method that would enable sharing more than just base numbers, and that would also be of help to Fab City to push forward what you're trying to do. And I think that what you're saying about the Global South is also precisely related to this.
Does it count as, I don't understand, because Adrian asked me about hard data, and you're telling me that it's not about hard data, but tell me how do you want me to explain the long-term goal or commitment, as you call it? Can you agree?
If honestly, I'm more concerned about the short term. And that's basically also the ground for the discussion. But on the longer term, I think if you're telling us, I think it's great. Very honestly, and on a personal level, my opinion of the will that you express to involve more global South cities. That firstly, how do you identify them? How do you contact them? How do you work on the territories to say, well, here, that's like here, they could use a Fab city and not the neighboring city, because we could see that there are cities in the network that maybe not, the ones, for instance, Seoul. Like Seoul, I mean, I don't know the social landscape of Seoul, but in a way, I can see that it's probably not the most precarious area in South Korea. So my question is, it's aiming at, it's not aiming at pointing figures at Fab City, it's aiming at saying, well, how can we do better together so that next time we meet, and hopefully in 18 months or before, I hope, we can say, you can say yes to our question of, has this been the case? And can we measure that? And if it, lots of NGOs like Medicine Without Frontiers and so on are acting with governments, but also as non-governmental organizations, and they don't, they also can act in cases of urgency and so on. And I think that the idea, personally, and I think we both engaged in this discussion together because we believe that Fab City, and even more, because I could see, or we could see that you're using the term of bioregion. This is something that is not just a term. It's not just, an eye candy designable term. It's something that, impacts the life of people, be it on sustainability or the ties of sustainability to the social aspects. So eventually, I want us together to be able to say, yes, we've been putting a foot in the global south, and this is, the picture of the person that now has a job. This is the picture of the person that now has food on their plate. So, I mean,
that's
I don't have the answer.
18 goal. That's your 18-month goal. I mean, I can share with you that 18-month goal, and we can. I agree. I love the spirit also, to be honest, which is let's meet again in 18 months and talk about this goal. And which are the metrics? Well, I would like to say that I would love to have like a bigger representation of really active cities in the global south, because also another issue that we have is that not all the cities are active, and that's basically because we haven't had the capacity to support properly the cities that are part of the network. That means developing training programs both for the policymakers and also for the local innovators, as we're doing with the Master in Design for Distributed Innovation, for instance. So yeah, that will be, in 18 months, I would love to have both going, the Masters and the policymakers training program, in a few cities in the global south, let's say 3 or 4. That's an 18-month goal. I think that's achievable. And yeah, definitely bioregionalism is something that resonates a lot of what we're trying to do. And to be honest, more and more I'm trying to think about how irrelevant is to talk about cities, because the cities are very abstract, and it kind of we believe that there are objects, but at the end they depend on a bioregional dimension, and at the neighborhood and the smaller scale is where real things happen. So I also believe that we should go in that direction. Then you say it's 6 months or 4 months, because I have to go in. I have to go already, but I can make an extra couple of minutes.
Yeah, please, if you want to tell us about the 6 months period or milestone.
6 months. 6 months. That's January 2023. I don't know if this is a commitment or a prediction. A commitment. It's kind of, I don't know. Again, for me, okay, we're gonna keep doing what we're doing, and that's a that's actually quite a big commitment. Is I don't know. Again,
Can I suggest something?
It's no, but wait a second. I don't know how many of you have run your own institutions and have taken the challenge to start something from zero and make it something to grow. And to fund itself, and even the ones that and that's part of my commitment is actually keep it alive, which is quite a hell of a job, and together with an amazing team. Yeah, go ahead.
Because that a commitment is meant to be exceptional, right? And of course, you cannot say we are going to keep on doing the same thing.
Yeah, but I don't want to sell you. I don't want to sell you used cars. You know what I mean? I don't need to sell you a used car. I don't need to. That's the thing. Like, I want to make a commitment. I really believe, and it makes sense to what I want to do, not just because you're asking me.
Can I suggest
But please go ahead.
So
yeah.
Something I can imagine, and I don't know if this, I don't ask you to commit on that now, of course, it's just an example. But if you're saying that since 2011, and of course that's a bit unfair of me to say so long ago, but that's, you know, where the starting point has been placed. So that's been more than 10 years, and now we meet, and you're saying, and we can understand that, we do understand that, because it's complex problems by definition. You're saying, well, I cannot say that even Barcelona with a soil, or sorry, not a soil, but a field that is already inclined towards the ideal Fab City can show numbers, and we cannot say that this has been working. Can I suggest that and that was also the topic of governance that we wanted to elaborate, was, you know, how can the structure of Fab City Foundation mature in terms of methodology and public participation with maybe the local nodes, maybe with the citizens, maybe with, you know, involving more communities, maybe more experts also on the different matters of working in the city, of which ecological engineers, for instance, and different matters of ecological management. Can we suggest that you're going to make that in 6 months we are going to see an active actions to include more broadly people, so that, you know, it's not the people that failed previously that are going to keep doing the same thing, and that in 18 months we are not going to see results?
So
it's a bit
I was explaining before, the Fab City Global Initiative has 3 components: the Fab City Network, the Fab City Collective, the Fab City Foundation. The Fab City Collective is supposed to be that more permeable element of the whole initiative, the more inclusive, the more, again, like a more messy governance, in which, you know, very self-organized. So I think, like I said, Lucas is around maybe, but it's a good commitment to say that the Fab City Collective will be more structured and more clear to welcome people, which is, again, for me, it's difficult because this is part of the things that we're doing, and it's part of the efforts that we're doing. But connected to that you're mentioning is the fact that putting in motion the Fab City Collective as that, I think like that could be the perfect platform to welcome, you know, individuals, peoples that are not part, as you say, of the internal, but it's more peripheral, more connected, and welcome them and make them relevant for the rest of the network.
So we are going to see.
Yeah, that's Fab City Collective.
Yeah. Okay. And so 1 month, like what will the Fab City Foundation or Fab City movement do within 1 month?
In 1 month is 11th of September. Ooh, that's a very bad date. What are we gonna do? We're gonna keep working on making the most amazing Fab Fest ever. That is gonna happen in Bali. It takes a lot of work. So in 1 month, I can tell you that all our efforts are gonna gear toward to make the Fab Fest an example of events in the world. To, again, like it's embedded, the sustainability agenda. We're gonna do carbon offset. We're gonna do waste offset in the event. The whole event material cycle is based on the Fab City principles. We're building a Fab City campus. We're doing the Fab City challenge. So we're designing what it could be, something really inspiring for the people, and that's where we're going to put our efforts.
If I may suggest something towards is that in relationship to that event, in 1 month, there is an effort towards formalizing the information on the impact of the event. We were talking about the waste management there. We have numbers about the travel cost. There are numbers of interesting ideas in the chat about how we can understand and how members of the initiative can grasp a little bit better. So there could be something really interesting in leveraging further our discussion towards that kind of information.
I sent you our 2 partners. This is the partner for the waste offset of the events for people interested. And this is the partner for the carbon offset.
Yeah, so there could be somewhere where all that information is localized for if people, because I mean, when we started the discussion, there was a lot of echoes of the questions we were asking regarding the sustainability of the event within the networks at large of Fab City. So it would maybe be interesting to have all the relevant information around that gathered in one place within the next month, so that people are able to keep that discussion living. Because I believe a lot of people that attend here too were struck by that, and by how you put together this issue and the rest that we've discussed.
My answer to that is that we are addressing these issues with these two partners. It's going to be out when it's going to be out. Again, like on top of everything that we're doing, that is a lot. I cannot tell you that in 1 month I will deliver you this, but you will have, I mean, everyone will have access to what the event signifies in terms of carbon and waste production, and also the actions that we're taking on mitigate those. Yeah.
So what we can sort of conclude
in 1
on
month, in 1 month, it's impossible to tell you any, to be honest. Again, like I can tell you in 1 month I can commit to have another call if you want and chat. I can commit to things that I don't want to overpromise you, and especially in this moment that is sensitive, and because we're putting a lot of energy in what we're doing, believe me, and we can, anything that we introduce to the system is quite a disturbance, especially now. And 1 month before the event, which is going to be in 1 month, I would not put myself or anyone into that pressure.
Okay, so for instance, what you were saying earlier about the Bali event, which you just repeated an invitation for everyone to join, physically, of course. Yes, thanks for acknowledging. So what you were saying about the involvement of the communities, the communities that are going to be abroad, is to say that they will be able to watch recordings of sessions. Fair enough, but they will not be able to engage locally. So, I mean, to me, that's eventually.
Wait a second. No. Yes. Wait a second. That's exactly. Look, we are organizing an event in Bali for the many reasons I explained before, which is, lifting up the potential that this, not only Bali, but the rest of Indonesia has. There's a program that is curated by us, right? It's the panels, it's a symposium, there's a policy day that is with the people. There's a Fab City Challenge, which are all, it's quite an interesting way to engage as well. But there is a series of workshops proposed by people in which we are not limiting that they can basically connect with people everywhere around the world. So what I cannot commit to, because it takes efforts to make things. I don't know if have you made a hybrid event for a network of 2,000 labs in the world? I mean, we tried the last couple of years, and it takes effort. And this was the year of coming together, to be honest, and also to put effort in a place, right? We also have the Fab City roundtables. We have 4 Fab City roundtables, so we do online events already. But I want to emphasize that the content of the conference is going to be out there. The symposium, depending on the budget, if we have enough budget, we're gonna stream it. Actually, for you, it will be too early. It starts at 9 a.m., but you can catch up at the middle of the symposium. That is also another thing to consider, the time zone difference. And the people that is running their own workshops, they can just take their computer and create a link in Zoom, Google Meets, or Jitsi, and make a hybrid version of it. No, we are not. I'm sorry, we're not stopping anyone to do it.
So we will need to conclude. But what I hear from what you're saying is that the responsibility of making something sustainable, you're pushing it towards participants and people that want to engage in that. So basically,
no, we're making a sustainable event. Adrian, don't put well. Okay, the judge is going to speak, guys, in his own trial system.
It's not a judge, Thomas. It's not a judge. I'm trying to conclude.
Don't lecture me, Adrian. This is disrespectful.
Great.
This is not what I'm saying. Not be disrespectful. This is what you did in the social networks. It's like this. I'm saying what I'm saying, right? And then you just want me to take a position because you have a judgment and you have an idea of what we should do. So I'm sorry, we are not doing what you want us to do. We can keep having this conversation respectfully.
I'm concluding, Thomas. I'm concluding on the fact that you don't want to take action. What you've just said on the commitments is literally true, continuing business as usual, even though the sheer amount of energy that you've been spending in Fab City movements since 2011 hasn't been leveraging any results. And now you're saying us that the resource usage to go to Bali is going to be useful. And I mean, that's just what I'm trying to conclude on. And then I'm leaving people to judge on the content of what you've been presenting.
It's your judgment.
This is relevant or not. This is not a judgment.
It's your judgment. It's your judgment, Adrian. Thank you. But again, it's very, again, don't interpret my words and make a judgment out of them. Don't say what I say. This is disrespectful in front of me. I say you what I said.
If I may conclude for everyone,
it's very disrespectful, guys. It's really also, it's really disrespectful.
I think everyone has made their point clear. And if I may very shortly go back to Peter's work to fully conclude that session, because we have to wrap up. I believe Peter mentioned that in what he has been seeing, there was sometimes a lot of ideas with little practice. And I think that the month and 6 months and 18-month goals that you've said or proposed, Thomas, should be leveraged in focusing on the distributed aspect, including what the digital can bring, maybe in the future a different way than the way Bali is organized. I think that a lot that we've said so far can be leveraged toward a compromise between the positions that have been placed here. And I believe it would be genuinely interesting.
Nadia, we have every 3 months, we have a roundtables that we organize. We're launching a distributed master in innovation. Again, I try to say things, but it's up to you guys. You made your judgment. I'm sorry, I know that you read a lot and you have a lot of things to lots of opinion. Welcomes. I'm gonna take notes. I suggest you that you go out in the world and try to do something and understand the complexity of it. But thank you for the effort again and the invitation.
Thank you very much for everyone for having attended our event. And this event will be just slightly cleansed, verified in terms of recording, and we will be uploading it probably tomorrow online. We will be sharing the link to everyone on our website and the social media. And in the meantime, if you want to contact us for anything, you can use hello@freds.org, which is an address that is available on our website. And yeah, I mean, looking forward for the next discussions at the milestones that we defined. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, everyone.